Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Ross. I'm going to be chairing today. But more importantly, this is Jamie Kass. He's an associate professor at Tohoku University, and he's here to deliver a very special edition of TSVP times RAM. So this is for the Researcher Appreciation Month and hosted by TSVP. So thank you to everyone involved in that. So Jamie is a New York native, so he's got strong opinions about Japanese bagels. And he did his PhD at City University of New York, and then JSPS and a postdoc in the Okinawa unit here at OIST until about 1.5 years ago, when he took up a post as an assistant professor in Tohoku University, which is in Sendai. And for anyone who hasn't been to Sendai, there's a lovely Irish bar there called The Crack that you should absolutely check out. Okay, so I'm excited to hear Jamie's talk that is hopefully going to be an inspiration to those of us wanting to stick around in Japan. We should point out that the tagline, the subheading got pulled off the advert, so he wants to stress that he is not an expert and that it's not like this is what you must do, but rather it's other things that Jamie is still learning how to do. So please, Dr. Kass, take it away.
Thank you very much, Sam. Yeah, I'd like to humbly begin my talk emphasizing my subtitle. So I'm Jamie Kass. I'm associate professor at the Graduate School of Life Sciences at Tohoku University. That's up north in Sendai. And I run the macroecology lab. There's my self-designed icon. And the title of the talk is Running a University Lab in Japan as a Foreigner, with the extremely important subtitle of and other things I'm still learning how to do. So again, I am not an expert at all in this, but hopefully I can share some of my experiences that can help us all collectively learn about how to do this in an expert fashion. So I'm going to start with a self-introduction. I will then move on to a very, very brief explanation of my research and a less brief explanation of my academic journey. I will then go to opportunities and challenges in Japanese academics. You can see that opportunities is boldened and for a reason and in a different color because I want to emphasize them over the challenges. It's a positive talk. And I will then move on to my continuing education as a professor in Japan. This is education that is definitely not over. And then I will end with some final tips for those of us who are searching for an academic career in Japan. So first, a very quick self-introduction. As Sam just said, I'm from New York City, specifically Queens in the USA. We are known for bagels, pizza, and Spider-Man. We do not have the Empire State Building, unfortunately, or the Statue of Liberty, but we have lots of very exciting pizza. I've lived in Japan for a total of about 6 years. This includes some short-term stays. My latest long stay has started in OIST about 5 years ago. I do speak Japanese, but I have studied for about 20 years. It doesn't necessarily take that long to learn Japanese fluently unless you are me. I have 2 wonderful children. One of them was born right before my PhD, and the other one was born in the middle of my PhD. So good planning. And I grew up in the city, so I was not surrounded by lots of wildlife, but I did read a lot about animals from a young age, from excellent scientific journals, such as the ones you see on top, and I got inspired and thus became a biologist. And so as you will see during the talk, I had a not so straight career path, and I do want to emphasize that I think this is the norm in academics, although not all of us always want to talk about that, but I will today. So what do I study now? I am in the fields of macroecology and biogeography. For those of you not familiar, macroecology is kind of like biology studied through a macroscope instead of a microscope, where we're looking at things at the level of individuals, organisms at the level of individuals, communities, and broad patterns of biodiversity. And then biogeography, very simply, is why are species where they are, and a little bit more than that. So I work on predicting species ranges, predicting biodiversity patterns, and studying the effects of global change, including climate change, land use alteration, et cetera, on biodiversity. And so in my work, we employ statistical and machine learning modeling approaches very often. And so a lot of my job is trying my best to improve these methods. And so on the right side, you can see a workflow of a model that I use quite often called the species distribution model. You think I know how to pronounce it after all these years. It takes occurrence data on species and data on the environment. It uses a correlative modeling approach to estimate the relationship between the species and the environment. So you can make nice plots that show these relationships, and you can also make maps of potential distributions for the species. And you can also put these individual models together to make estimates of biodiversity with many assumptions. So moving on to my research and academic journey. So as I mentioned before, we start in New York City, where I finished my bachelor's. I wanted to do something different than continue in academics because I had absolutely no idea what I was doing with my life. And I decided it would be a great idea to go to Japan and teach English, which was an excellent choice. And I went all the way over to Tokushima. I had studied a year of Japanese in New York in college and was very excited to use all the Japanese I learned, and promptly found out that everyone in Tokushima had a very heavy accent and I couldn't understand anything. And then I learned some of the accent and then promptly forgot all of it. And then I came back to the US and did a master's of environmental management at Duke University, which is typically a terminal degree. So typically we look for jobs after this degree. We don't continue in academics. And so then during this time, I got a foreign language area studies fellowship from the US government, which is available to grad students studying language at the advanced level. So I got a really cool fellowship just for studying Japanese, because basically almost no one else was. And so I got the opportunity to go to Hokkaido and do a homestay program and an advanced language course, which is really, really great. And then I came back to the US very excited to finally work. And guess what? Economic depression. And so this was the year 2008. I worked in a number of cafes. I worked in a very nice bakery. I worked at an NGO that was restoring a boat. I also worked at an NGO that was doing some greenwashing. And then I moved to California, thinking that that was the place for environmental management jobs. And I ended up in an herbal drugstore. And then I was also fired a couple of times from various positions. After this, I finally found a job as a GIS specialist in California. This is what I was trained to do for my master's. GIS is Geospatial Information Systems. It's basically folks who make maps. And so I had this job for about 4 years, but it was very IT. And I felt like I was becoming more of an IT person. I really wanted to go back into biology because that was my initial passion. And so I went back for a PhD at the ripe age of about 32. I was one of the oldest people in my program, and did a PhD in biology back in New York City at the City University of New York, specifically at City College, which is in Harlem, Manhattan, a lovely place. And then after I finished this, sorry, before I finished this, I got a JSPS summer program fellowship to travel back to Japan. This was one of my desires from the beginning, is to return to Japan as much as possible. And so I did this as part of my PhD, and I'll explain a bit in more detail later. So then I finished my PhD. I came to OIST. I did a great 4 years of research here as a JSPS postdoc mostly. And then I ended up in Sendai at Tohoku University, just like I had previously explained. So the story begins in New York City when I was doing my PhD research. And my research in particular was how can we integrate species interactions, which are things like pollination, competition, predation, into models of species ranges that typically used climate variables only. And so we did a lot of interesting research there that focused on different systems, including monarch butterflies, some rodents in South America. And during this time, I was talking to one of my mentors, Professor Anna Carnaval at CCNY, about going to Japan and doing research. And I said, I'd really like to go. I just don't know how. And she said, hey, have you heard of the JSPS summer program? I said, no, I have not. She said, I know a student who did it. It was really fun. She said, you should do it. I said, maybe I should. And so then I went to my main mentor, a very friendly and accommodating professor named Robert Anderson. And he said, sure, go spend a summer in Japan. Just make sure you get PhD research out of it. So then I did just that. I applied to the program. I thankfully got in. I joined the JSPS summer program of 2016. And so I was initially interested in invasive raccoons. For those of you who don't know, who maybe spent most of your Japan time in Okinawa, raccoons are invasive throughout the entire country, except for this particular part of Japan. And so had they get there, people brought them as pets and then released them, and then all havoc broke loose, and now they're found almost everywhere in the country. And so I was interested in how raccoons interact with other carnivore mammals that happen to be in the same places. So one is the native tanuki or raccoon dog, and then another one is another invasive species called the masked palm civet. And so what do they all do when they get in the same place? Are they competing? How do those interactions affect their distributions? And so I did work on this. And I worked with the very smart Professor Fumito Koike, who is an expert on invasive species. And I did some camera trapping in a local nature park nearby. Unfortunately, all the data I could not use because I didn't record one raccoon throughout the 2 weeks that I sampled, which is maybe not so surprising. Thankfully, Professor Koike knew folks in the environmental management department, and we got a really great data set. And so we were able to publish a paper and make my mentor very happy because I accomplished my goals. And so then I came back from Japan. And then after my PhD was over, I had to decide on my next step. And there was a big desire to move to Japan, but for a much longer time. I wanted to live here and work here and do research here. And, you know, there were a number of reasons, including family, including some great colleagues I had, and some other reasons too. And so I had two options. One option was to do a JSPS postdoctoral fellowship. Thankfully, I was a US citizen, and so I could use the US as a nominating authority, which allows me to compete with other US citizens and not the rest of the world. Some countries have this benefit, some of them don't. For everyone else, there's an open call, which is slightly more competitive. Also, the open call is available only to graduate students who did not, the nominating authority is only open to graduate students who did not get their degree in Japan. So if you got your degree in Japan, you need to join the open call. The other option was to respond to calls from research institutions, big ones, like DKang is one example, that often hire postdocs, sometimes a lot of them at once. Or a big university project, and an example would be WPI, I'll talk a bit about that later, where they hire lots of postdocs. But typically, in Japanese universities, professors do not have the funds to hire postdocs. They need to apply to very big grants to hire them. And so there's just not that many going around, which is unfortunate. So what I did was I went through the NIH in the USA and was able to get one of these JSPS postdoctoral fellowships. I started with a short-term fellowship, which is 1 year long, and I was lucky enough to be able to extend it by getting another fellowship called the Standard, which is 2 years long. So I had 3 years total of JSPS postdoc time, which was great. And then I stayed an extra year and was an OIST postdoc. And I worked in the Biodiversity and Biocomplexity Unit with Professor Evan Okinawa. Some of you might have seen this person before. And we were able to do some really great research, including map global diversity of ants across the world, and also look at how human land use change affects ant communities throughout Okinawa. And this was a biodiversity monitoring project in collaboration with the Okion section, a really great unit in OIST that still is continuing this monitoring all over the island. So after this, unfortunately, as postdocs are temporary, as some of us know, I had to decide on my next step. And so what was I going to do next? I still had a desire to remain in Japan. I really wanted to do research here. And so what I did was I applied to a program called the Hakubi Project at Kyoto University. It's a very prestigious fellowship for 5 years. It is terminal, unfortunately, so it doesn't necessarily lead to a faculty position, but it's a very nice fellowship, and it would be a great gateway to some kind of faculty position in the future. Unfortunately, I didn't get it. And so instead, I pivoted back and thought, well, originally what I wanted to do was be a professor. I wanted to run a research lab, and I don't know when that will be. And so just as some background, the traditional system in Japan, we have 3 professor types, and this is quite different from how this looks in the rest of the world. So assistant professors do teaching, mentoring, and research, but they are not PIs of labs. It's very, very rare to find this. Associate professors are a higher position, so the salary is higher, and they do very similar things to assistant professors, and they're also not PIs of labs typically. The PI of the lab is the professor. The professor hires these other professors underneath the professor to work in the lab. Many of them work semi-independently, but they are not. They do not run the lab. And so the new system in Japan, trying to kind of match the Japanese academic system to how things work in many other parts of the world, they added a new position called the tenure-track associate professor. And so this is an associate professor, so a more junior person who is the PI of a lab. And so I said, that's for me. And one caveat is that it's kind of experimental because it's a very, very new position for Japan. It was only established maybe 10 to 15 years ago. And in my department, it was the first one they ever offered. So a little bit of experimentation there. I want to quickly just go over, for those interested, how I looked for this job and how best you can look for similar jobs. So the best way to look for faculty jobs in Japan is through job boards. The best one is JREC-in. It's a huge database full of job postings. Basically, any academic job in Japan is always posted here. That's the place to find them. It's in Japanese, but there are lots and lots of postings in English. And so that's good for everyone. Another way is through announcements in academic mailing lists. So I highly suggest that people join an academic society in Japan, because that's one of the best ways to get job postings, sometimes before they're even up on the job board. And related to this is word of mouth. Particularly in Japan, this is very important. So when people know who you are and they know what you do, they talk about you a lot to all their colleagues, and all their colleagues that have new jobs that open up, they might hear about you and email you before they post anything. And so establishing these networks is very, very important for those of us looking for jobs here, because word of mouth is vital in this country. Of course, we all probably do this already, but you can look up lab websites that interest you, and then of course reach out to the PI in charge. A big exception is that Japanese academic jobs are not typically posted on social media. There are some exceptions. I occasionally scroll through Twitter and find these postings, but it's very rare. More often, they're found on job boards and emails. And so, big suggestion: always email the PI directly if you're interested in working in a lab, and also email the department if you're interested in working as a faculty member in that school, because they want to hear from you. So I had a moment of serendipity. I had applied to that job that I just described at Tohoku University. And around the same time, I had the opportunity to present at a joint seminar, the OIST Tohoku Joint Seminar Series, Volume 3, which was at Sendai. And so this was a great opportunity to meet potential colleagues, people I might be working with if I had gotten the job. I got to also meet the dean and talk to her. And I could show them who I was and what I was doing. And so I had this really great chance. So big recommendation is take advantage of these opportunities. When you have the opportunity to present your work at a venue where potential colleagues or potential people who might be in hiring committees might see you and see the work you're doing, you should always jump on that opportunity. So yeah, currently I run a lab called the Macroecology Lab. I work with the very talented Everton Miranda, who is below. He's the assistant professor in the lab. He's from Brazil. I'm from the US. We have a bunch of other students from different countries. So in total, we represent 6 countries now. I know it's kind of low and we're working on it. Next year, it'll be like 8 or 9 or something. We have 12 students, 6 graduate students, including a PhD student. The other 6 are rotating undergraduate students. So it's a big mix of different ages and experiences. We have 1 visiting student from Mexico, a PhD student. And we're slowly expanding to become kind of the United Nations of my department. So the lab is fully bilingual, meaning that all of us who are able speak Japanese and English almost every single day. This includes the Japanese students. And when they come in, they're very unsure and they're like, oh, my English is not so good. By the end, they're really, really good speakers, very confident, and we just have conversations like normal. So that kind of environment works. And again, a very international environment compared to a lot of the other, maybe more typical labs in Japan. Big deal, there are 2 foreign professors in this lab, and there are no Japanese ones. So this is very, very, very rare. And I think maybe, at least in my department, the only unit like this. There might be other ones. It worries some people, but we're making it work so far. So far, it's working quite well. Just to recap, the kind of research that my lab does, we do species distribution modeling. I just mentioned that. We have lots of applications for it. We do conservation range estimates, biodiversity mapping. We build software. Most recently, we're trying to predict ecosystem service provisions over space and time, which is pretty exciting. And so aside from that, what do I do on the job, like every day? So I teach undergraduate and graduate courses. This can be in the form of an omnibus course where each professor teaches a single lecture, or it could be a semester-long course that I'm in charge of. And so I have a course this year, animal ecology, that I have to provide all the materials for and teach all the lessons. I also taught a field course in animal ecology. And so that's also on the professor to kind of make a new syllabus basically from scratch and make an experiment. And so I worked on this with the assistant professor from the school. I also do a lot of student mentoring. So this includes mentoring for their research projects. It also includes questions they might have about careers. One student just got hired for a company, and he had asked me, what do you think? Should I do a master's? Should I join industry? And we had a long conversation about that. Eventually, he chose industry, and I was happy with that. And I also talk about kind of student life issues as well, personal things when they come up. I manage the lab. So not just me, obviously, Professor Miranda helps as well, but we're in charge of the lab. We don't have any, we didn't until very recently have any assistants. And so for the longest time, we were managing all the paperwork, all the day-to-day purchases, all the phone calls to different offices. And this was mainly in Japanese. We were very lucky to very recently hire an office staff who's helping now with this, but it's been about a year and a half. I also work on writing grants. I work on a couple of different collaborative projects with international teams. So I'm on Zoom a lot. I give talks at the school and outside, organize events. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Serve on a couple of different committees, etc. And at the bottom of the list is my research. It's often at the bottom of everyone's list. Unfortunately, it's still there though. And so it's my job to kind of bump it up and make sure that I'm still doing my research. But it's very difficult because there's so many tasks that I'm personally responsible for. So opportunities and challenges now in Japanese academics from my humble perspective. So the first thing that I really, really want to emphasize is Japanese universities really, really want foreign students, foreign faculty, and Japanese faculty and students with international experience. They really, really want that. It's difficult regarding the implementation sometimes and the support, but they really want these people in their universities. And the question is usually why, and the answer is because they're all interested in internationalization. This is a big, big push right now in Japanese academics. Schools have internal diversity quotas that they need to fill. They also want their domestic students to be exposed to other cultures and languages to internationalize them, get them ready for study abroad programs and various other things, working in companies that might do international deals. and this is especially the focus is on English. More international collaborations and publications in general means more research funds and generally a higher impact level. When you branch out to the rest of the world and you work with people from around the world, you tend to get higher impact papers, and schools really care about that. And so there's been a positive trend in both foreign exchange students accepted to Japanese labs, but also Japanese students doing foreign exchange. And so this is only going to increase over time. So what could go wrong? I wanted you to recall back when you first arrived to Japan, if you were a visitor, it was really hard. There were lots of really hard things that you had to deal with. And maybe you felt like nobody understands. At least I did. So some differences might include, language, culture, food, religion, in general, fitting into society, making friends. The academic system is completely different. Everything's different. And this, obviously this depends on where you're coming from. It might be less different for others than for me, maybe. But for me, at least, it was very, very different. A lot of stuff I had to get used to. And so the Japanese administrators and decision makers who are in charge of university systems, they might not appreciate these challenges. Reasons might be, maybe they never had the opportunity to do a study abroad. Maybe they never spent a long time abroad. Maybe they don't have too many foreign colleagues they can consult with. Might be many reasons, but for I think in general, this might be an issue. And so there's a lot of international support for staff, of course for students, but for staff, particularly at OIST, but there is really not as much in most other universities in Japan. This is not really an emphasis. This is not really where a lot of universities put a lot of their funds. Why? There are very few foreign faculty in Japan. You just don't need to do that typically. And so, however, this is going to change, and everyone knows that. There will be more foreign faculty. Everyone needs to prepare for that. So there have been international research programs in Japan, but now there are more of them, and there's more emphasis for these programs on hiring lots and lots of international folks to do research. One example is the World Premier Institute WPI program. This is a big fund that basically builds a new department in your school. And so in my school at Tohoku, we were recently awarded this in the past year. And so they developed the Advanced Institute for Marine Ecosystem Change. And so I'm part of this, a minor part of this effort, but I'm involved in some way in it. I'm involved in the research in some way. And so I know a bit about it. And there's a very, very heavy push to hire international postdocs and also eventually faculty. As time goes on, every year or so, they release a new WPI program at a different school. So every year, they're going to have more and more schools that are looking desperately to hire international researchers. Another example is the Universities of International Research Excellence. It's a very large sum of money that was recently awarded to my school mainly for internationalizing. So the school pledged that they will become fully bilingual at some point in the future, and that they're going to hire lots of new international staff. They're going to bring in a lot of new international students, and thus improve the quality of research of the school. This program is supposed to continue over time. It's not clear when the next one's coming out, but another school is going to get this at some point. And we're going to have the same process all over again. And another school is going to have to hire lots and lots of international folks. I keep saying international folks. When I say international, I don't just mean foreigners. I also mean Japanese students and faculty, Japanese students and researchers who have significant international experience. And of course, there are more. This is just two examples. So my continuing education as a professor, I'm going to talk about some things that still confuse me and some things that I think I might have worked out in my head. So professors in Japan do many things at the same time. So they teach, they mentor, they work on committees, they do grants, they do a lot of paperwork. And also the research is supposed to be done in your spare time. This has been very difficult. So when I first started my job, I wasn't really prepared for this. And a year in, I finally had the paperwork under control. I didn't have much research output, unfortunately. Another thing is, this might not surprise most of you, Japanese universities operate in Japanese. This, some people feign being shocked when they get here, but I mean, I don't know, it's it's not that surprising. This includes emails, phone calls to offices, forms, student mentoring, teaching, but not all teaching, because a lot of the courses they would prefer to be taught in English, and the list goes on. There's a lot that happens in Japanese universities, and so it's a very good idea to at least have basic skills, because otherwise you're going to be left out of a lot of conversations, and it'll be difficult to keep up. Again, this does not mean you must be fluent in Japanese, because almost no foreigners are, right? It just means that you need to have some kind of skills. The university system, calendar, faculty duties, all of these were very unfamiliar to me. I had no idea. They were very different from what I was used to. And so I had to learn them. And there's no magical guide that someone gave me in the beginning saying, just read this and you'll know. It's all on the job experience. And when I ask people, can you please tell me about these things? They say, it's on the job experience. And so I've just learned them over time. And there've been many, confusing moments, but I think I'm mostly there now. Another thing that might come as a surprise is you build your own lab. When I entered, I was given a bunch of empty rooms. And then some of those empty rooms included some furniture that was donated to me that I asked for. But otherwise, everything is made by me. So I have to purchase furniture and equipment and things and assemble things by myself. It's fun if you're a really good designer. But if you're me, it was sometimes a painful experience. But we finally have it down, I think, after consulting with some people with a little bit more design common sense. In the beginning, there are no students. I have no employees. And so there's considerable alone time. I was by myself for some number of months. And so what really helped at this time was friendly colleagues. So I was in the same building as a number of different labs. They were interested in me. They wanted to come talk to me, invited me to lab meetings, et cetera. And this made things much easier. And so if you have friendly colleagues in your department and you can kind of scope out how friendly your department is when you visit these places, that's a big, big plus. Really important is dialogue with your department. So we had a number of different issues and we would grumble about them. But when I finally brought them up to my department, they responded. So I said, my Japanese emails, like I have to look through 20 Japanese emails every day. And if I'm Japanese, I just go, okay, like keep, no, keep, no. I can't do that. Like reading the subject takes a while. I can't immediately recognize what's important and what's not. When I explained that to them, they said, okay, that's fine. We'll just translate stuff. I said, thank you. Really, thank you. And so they did that, and that helped a lot. I was also having difficulties with Japanese paperwork, as you might imagine. I said, it's taking so much time. What should I do? And so I was told, actually, we know a consulting firm, and we hire from them all the time. Why don't you get an office assistant through that firm? And so we did, and I'm very thankful for that as well. So dialogue with the department is very important. They really care about how you're doing. They might not just interface with you every day. So you need to remind yourself to interface with them. You have to be more forward. Some great opportunities when I began my job. So I finally had the time and space to think about and pursue my own research directions. Obviously, the time for research was not maybe what I wanted, but I did have a significant amount of time. And for the first time, I was in charge of the research direction, which is very, very frightening, but it was also a great opportunity. I was awarded some startup funds. I know that in other parts of the world, everyone has startup funds, and they're very significant. In Japan, the startup funds might not be what someone from, say, the USA is used to. So, but they were significant enough for me to be able to purchase things for my lab and start doing stuff. However, some positions don't have those startup funds. So you need to maybe ask about that if that's important to you during the interview. But this, for me, was very useful. I was given lots of invitations. I had lots of invitations to give introductory talks to introduce myself. So when you're a new foreigner faculty member in a Japanese school, everyone's very interested in you. They're like, where'd this guy come from? Like, who is this? You know, what are they doing here? And so I got the opportunity to introduce myself and say, this is the work that I do. Like, hi, everyone. Like, you know, and so that was a great opportunity. I also had the opportunity to join lab meetings. So people said, hey, come by our lab, join our meetings. And so I got to meet students. I got to meet professors. And I mentor some of those students from the lab meetings that I met them at, actually. I also had the great opportunity to be involved in collaborations with colleagues. So I got introductions to join these big research efforts. And so currently I'm involved in a couple of big research projects that give me some research funds that allow me to pursue my own research. I have very dedicated, hardworking students. Like, these kids come on time every day. They leave on time every day, and they're really, really interested in the work they're doing, and they're super inquisitive, and I'm kind of lucky to have them, honestly. I've also had the opportunity to organize different events. In a few slides, I'll talk about that. But first, these are some of the talks that I was invited to give. So I'm part of the Ecology Society of Japan. It's the biggest ecology society in the country. They have a big annual meeting. They also have smaller regional meetings. And so because I moved to Tohoku, I had the opportunity to go to their regional meeting for the first time. And they said, again, like, who's this guy? And so they gave me a special lecture, which is really great. So I had the opportunity to introduce myself to my region. And from then, I plan to participate every year in the regional meetings, which is great. It's more of it gives me a feeling like I'm contributing more to a community. I also had the opportunity to give a talk at the ELAS Colloquium, which is a program that has new faculty hires make little videos about their work, and they distribute those to all the undergrads. So all the undergrads have to watch all the videos, and then they come to a big auditorium, and there's a live question and answer session where they ask live questions about our research to the new faculty. And so that was pretty exciting. And then I also had the opportunity to present a science presentation to a high school in Fukushima, which was a really great opportunity to do some outreach in the area. And so I also had the opportunity to construct a seminar series with the very talented Nobuaki Mizumoto, who was an OIST postdoc at the same time I was. We had the issue where we were ecologists in Japan, and we both wanted to attend more events in English, but we realized there were very few of them, and so we made one. So we made a seminar series. We invited all these early career researchers who all had experience working in Japan to give talks, but it was during COVID times, and so it's all online. And so when I finally moved to Tohoku, we decided now is the time, let's have a live event. So we had a live event last year. It was really, really great. 32 early career participants. We had 9 mentors from the level of full professor down to postdoc. And we had 2 days of presentations, peer mentoring, and discussion circles. That's me in the corner. We also had the grand opportunity of having the illustrious Fabienne Ziadi-Kunstli, who is an OIST marine scientist. And right next to her is Nobu Mizumoto, who is now working as a professor in the US. And so, oops, that arrow shouldn't be there. So some differences with teaching in the USA, at least from an American standpoint. So active class participation by students is really not so popular in Japan. I don't know if anyone has this experience, but most students don't go, me, me, me. They tend to be more quiet in the class. And so calling on students, which is something I tried to do after they didn't raise their hand, was even worse, because a lot of students just freeze and they don't know what to do, and it's just kind of embarrassing. And so these are cultural differences that I was not used to, because in Japan, typically the students listen to the professor. The professor doesn't usually engage the students as much. And so I decided a great thing to do would be group work, and that was magical. Like, group work really works well, because then students get in groups and they're very, very vocal, and they can give a little presentation about what they learned. And I felt like that was most effective. There's also less struggle, at least from an American standpoint, for students to come to lab on time and do their work. In Japan, students love to do that. And in the US, I feel like it's maybe a struggle with more students. So that's a benefit. However, inversely, there's more struggle to get students to talk about issues that they might be facing. And so this presents a problem for mentoring, because often I'm in a situation where I'm face-to-face with a student asking, how's everything going? And they all say, great. And I'm like, really? And they say, yes. And so it's hard to, if they have some kind of issues, it's hard for me to know. And so sometimes it takes multiple meetings to get to know the professor from the student standpoint, and then people kind of produce things that they might need to talk about. So that's also a process. And so, yeah, there are also, in general, just more face-to-face mentoring meetings with students. And so that's where this arrow comes in, because that makes that hard. And now you understand where the arrow comes from. I have benefited greatly from a mentor that was appointed to me, Professor Jotaro Urabe, who was about to retire the year that I came in. And he was kind of by my side the whole time. Every time I had a crazy question, he was able to answer it. So this was kind of instrumental for me to succeed in that first year. I also had lots of friendly and curious colleagues that helped out. Very helpful office staff in my department who, when I first met them, they were very embarrassed about their English ability. And I said, hey, it's okay. Let's just talk Japanese. And then everything was just smooth. And so it's a bit more difficult sometimes when my assistant professor needs help. But even when he calls in English, they're all very helpful for him, to him. And so everyone is a little bit bilingual, even if they're not used to using their English every day. Again, I have very inquisitive and hardworking students. I want to really emphasize that. I'm really happy with the students I got. The students in particular at my university, in Tohoku University, very hardworking, very dedicated. And I have, in general, supportive faculty and also admins who really want my feedback. So we have multiple meetings with the dean, with different administrative groups who want to know how I'm doing and who want to know all the challenges that I face and what I think we can do to improve that, because they know that they're going to be hiring more foreign faculty in the future, and they want to be prepared for it. And I'm sure that this is the same in any other university. So just some final tips, last few minutes. So these are qualities that I noted down after I had my interview. And these were all things that were very important qualities that people were, the interview staff was very interested in, and I thought I would share them with you. And so I feel like all of these qualities are important for job hunting equally. There's not one that's more important than the other. And so really, I think we should emphasize these qualities in our CVs and also discuss them during interviews. So academic record, research themes, international experience in general, diverse teaching experiences, and also Japanese ability, but also experience just being in Japan. People like to know about that. And so just for each one, the kind of questions that come up during the interviews were just like, how many papers? You might want to talk about that. Which journals? How many did you first author? That's just that this is maybe the same around the world. For the research themes, is it exciting? But more importantly, are you excited about your research theme? Is it cutting edge? Is it something that the department lacks that they really need? And can it bring in grants? How is this going to bring in money? Which might be difficult for some fields. The international experience can include any study abroads you might have had, collaborative research with international groups. Did you organize symposia that had international folks there? Did you have any talks at international conferences? Typically on Japanese CVs, they have different sections for international talks and domestic talks. They're very interested in the international ones, so it's important to emphasize those. Teaching experiences could include, were you a TA for a course? Did you teach any university courses? Did you teach any technical classes? At OIST, I taught a few of they're not known anymore as this, but skill pills. And that they were interested in that. It was a technical course that I helped to teach. And it wasn't a university course, but it was good experience. And then also mentoring students. How many students did you mentor? Who were they? People are interested in this stuff. So Japanese ability is what I mostly get asked about, like how much do I need to know, that kind of thing. I think at least basic skills are very appreciated. If you have, what you need to emphasize is that you do not have fears about communicating to others in the Japanese that you are not satisfied with. As long as you communicate that, like, I'm happy to work with you. You just need to work with me. I think most people are satisfied. How many years were you in Japan? You know, a lot of us might learn through osmosis. We're just here for a long time. We hear Japanese all the time. That's good. And then, are you committed to staying here? It's a big question, because when foreigners apply for jobs, often that's one of their biggest fears. They're going to get here, they're not going to like Japan, and they're going to leave the next year. They don't want that. So you need to show them that you're committed and tell them the reasons you like to work here. And that is it. So thank you very much for listening. I'd like to thank all the mentors I've had along the way, also the TSVP program, and special thanks to all the folks I work with at Tohoku University who have made my job there so rewarding. Thank you.